Hey, everybody, welcome to week 274. The government is shut down, but we're open for business. And we're going to be talking about opportunity zones and other things that Adam and Jack want to talk about. And Ashley Tyson, the opportunity zone czar, guru, expert, etc., is going to be joining us, which will be fun. And I have already gotten an email this morning from one very interested party because they're looking at some stuff, and then talked with somebody last night that's in commercial real estate development and that sort of thing. So they are going to be tuning in. And there is Ashley Tyson. Good to see you.
What's going on, Mr. Fry? How are you, sir?
We're good. We're really good. Good to see you. Ashley is actually, this is a little known fact, but he's actually my twin. He is 6'10". I am 5'8", but we are twins. It's just a medical miracle. I don't know how that happened.
I think that they made a movie about us back in the 90s.
Yeah, Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito.
That's exactly right.
Yep.
It's like Mutt and Jeff.
Yeah, I would be Mutt.
Well, I like your shirt, man. I recently got back to posting. I've been rucking on Wednesdays with the F3 crowd, doing 4 miles with about 55 pounds on. It's been good.
Oh, yeah, that's a big deal. So just before we get going, Ashley Tyson, I'm trying to remember who it was that said I need to meet Ashley when I came back here a little over 10
John
years
Putnam.
ago. Oh, John Putnam. Wow. National Christian Foundation. What a great guy. So John Putnam says, you got to meet Ashley Tyson. So I meet Ashley, and Ashley's like, dude, you got to get involved in this thing called F3. And I'm like, and so he tells me about it, because at the time, I think David Redding and you were doing a lot of business together.
Yeah, we were law partners.
Yeah.
Yep.
And David Redding is the guy that started it. He's been on the Anything But Typical podcast. Former Green Beret, started this whole thing called F3, which is such a cool thing. But anyway, I was like, 5:30 a.m. workouts are against my religion. Adam has found that religion. I have not. But so I lead Sunday afternoons at 4:30 p.m. That's more my style at Myers Park High School. So anyway, thank you, Ashley. But we will get back to you more on opportunity zones. But we want to first address the shutdown. What's that mean? Adam and Jack, the one thing that would solve this whole thing, I'm just going to say it and then I'm going to shut up. For those who want to shut things down, do it like a business owner. If you're going to shut it down, you're going to cut your own pay. That's that simple. We've all cut our own pay to make payroll. Any business owner out there that's listening and watching this thing, you know the same drill. We've made payroll many times by, hey, honey, take any of that stuff that you just bought back because we're not paying ourselves right now. We'll get it at some point, but hold off. If Congress would just do the same thing, it'd solve a lot of problems. But, simplicity is the essence of things profound, and evidently they can't deal with that. So Will Johns, thank you so much. Yes, F3 is great. Come and try it. Come join us sometime at F3 Man Cave, 4:30 p.m. Myers Park High School parking lot. Be there, be square. So Adam and Jack, let's talk a little bit about shutdowns, ramifications for business. What does this really mean? There's a whole lot of hype out there. And then let's go deep into some of the opportunity zone stuff that Ashley has, because there have been some changes and some regulations, some opportunities in the opportunity zones. And by the way, we're broadcasting from Savona Mill, our new 105-year-old digs in an opportunity zone. So, which is really cool. So, Adam, Jack.
Yeah, I'll let Jack make sure that we don't get flamed after I get done here. But I agree with you wholeheartedly, Gary. Independent of whatever leaning that I have, being a government worker that doesn't make a lot of money anyway, not getting paid, that just sucks. I think if you just think about like, well, let me think about my own employees. And if I just stop paying them for 5 weeks, what would actually happen? I mean, it puts like a real sense of like, hey, how would that feel? And like, again, as a business owner, I know this isn't true at Shoemaker, but BGW, I'm sure there's a couple people where it's like, like maybe you're not working as hard as you could, and we'll try to coach you up. And it's like, those are my equivalent of like the government worker that, and if there's any BGW people listening to this, please tune out. That's not you. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the other people that aren't listening. But if I just said tomorrow you're not going to get paid for 5 weeks, while we shut the place, like that would suck. I mean, I remember in the pandemic, when we said, hey, part of what we're going to have to do if this whole stimulus package doesn't go through is we're going to have to ask people to take pay cuts. It's like you get a riot on your hands. And I think the business owners that have had to ask people to take pay reductions to keep the band going, it's tough to recover from that from a morale perspective. And it puts people, if you just think about your own company, especially in Charlotte, anybody that's making below about $100,000 by default is living paycheck to paycheck just based on the cost of living. So that's the human side that just sucks. But from a tax perspective, there's really two things. One is obviously don't expect a whole lot of the IRS. Returns will still get processed to the extent that a refund payment is still automated, it'll go out, but like, don't expect to get through to anybody else during this intervening time period because, most all of them are furloughed, at this point. So that's just item number one. Item number two is from a myth dispelling business. There's been a lot of back and forth between, we're fighting to save healthcare, on the one hand, and we're just funding healthcare for illegals on the other hand. Seems to be the two ends of the spectrums.
Yeah.
The money for illegals is sort of an indirect reference to if you have to go to a hospital and you're illegal, you get medical care. Like that's just the deal. And that's been a law for a long time. Now, I think it's going back to Ronald Reagan. Like a hospital can't refuse you service. Now, the hospital can say, hey, fancy hospital in Huntersville, we're going to ship your ass to county. Like they actually, in fact, do that. Let's send you to like the low cost, provider. But we still treat people in the US, period, just as a point of reference to law. So I think the indirect reference is that, some of the money I think could indirectly subsidize a county hospital that then service an illegal person by law. The county hospital, no matter what, is still going to have to service the illegal person. So you're just talking about the cost reimbursement. Is that either the state or the county that's going to have to pick that up? Or is that going to have to be the government or the federal government that picks up the tab for that? But somebody's picking up the cost unless they change the law in totality, which has been around for most of my adult life. And as someone who had a blood clot in Mexico and was kind of scared about that because he had to have a flight coming back and wanted to know like what to do about it, to show up at the hospital and say, hey, by the way, we're going to need your checking account so we can go ahead and take a $5,000 deposit before we can treat you. It sometimes sucks to be in other countries and have to deal with medical care, but that's what the one side piece is about. The other side, from a tax perspective, that they're talking about is the Obamacare premium subsidies. When Obamacare was passed, the Affordable Care Act was passed. The whole idea there was that if your employer didn't have a plan, or you were unemployed, but otherwise could afford to get some insurance, you had the opportunity to buy insurance on a healthcare exchange that just, if everybody was required to get insurance, would in theory, increase the risk pool, lower price and stuff like that. But they didn't really lower the price of health insurance. Instead, so Aetna could still charge what Aetna was going to charge. Blue Cross Blue Shield was still going to charge what Blue Cross Blue Shield was going to charge. But what the government did is they said, okay, look, if the premiums are going to be, $24,000 a year, which by the way is pretty close to what the premiums will be for a family, regardless of whether the employer is providing it or the exchange is providing it. Obviously, $24,000 is a lot of money for someone making, $65,000 as a percentage of their income. So they just said, if you make below that, we're going to give you money to help pay for the premiums in the form of a credit. Like, we'll pay the premiums on your behalf, is effectively what happened. The problem with the Affordable Care Act, though, going back to the 100 grand scenario, is that was an all or nothing line. So like, if you made $1 more than where the premium cutoff happened, now you paid all of it. So like, so when they talk about people worried about making too much money, like they were talking about like, holy shit, if I make $1 more, sorry, Ashley, I'm the only one allowed to swear. You're gonna have to watch your language. If you make one, and I know Ashley's got it in him too. If you make,
come on, man, I'm like the clean guy.
Yeah, that's right. If you make $1 more, then all of a sudden all your health insurance was taxable, and you were facing a big tax bill that if you paid the tax bill would end up having you have effectively taking a pay cut. And the way the tax bill showed up is that, you got your bill at the end of the year when you filed your tax return, and like, holy crap, what do you mean I owe $20,000? It's like, sorry, dude, you got to give back all that health insurance money that you took from the government. So under the Biden version of the stimulus package that happened, which is the one that he passed after he was elected, they included a provision that indexed the amount that you had to pay for health insurance to your salary. And they fixed it at like in between 8 and 9%. So instead of having that absolute cliff at about $65,000 where it was all or nothing, instead, I think up to maybe $150,000 in salary, that's off the top of my head, you never had to pay more than 8 to 9% of your pay. So what it did is it increased the number of people that could receive the subsidy. Well, that's the pool of people that they're talking about, like, in December, if that's not fixed, all those people will all of a sudden have a massive tax increase, which just would end up reverting them back to pre-stimulus level, which I don't know what the people did. Maybe they didn't buy the health insurance since they took the penalty for not having it away, and they just went to the hospital, and then you're back in the endless loop again, or what they actually did. But that's the tax increase, independent of like the Medicare, Medicaid to the state stuff that they're talking about. That's the tax increase that the Democrats are talking about, is people that are in that window that didn't receive a subsidy under ACA because they were above 3x the federal poverty limit or whatever the calculation was. They started getting a credit up to like 150 grand in wages. So that's what they're talking about from their end. I mean, that's independent of should you tie that to a continuing resolution or not. It's just that's what the debate's about. That they're talking about. And the reason for the urgency is that re-enrollment for people happens coming up here pretty soon. So I'm either going to have a big bill or I'm not going to have a big bill. And I think when there's a lot of people in North Carolina, but it's part of the reason that Tom Tillis, our senator, was pretty fired up, is that the Medicare and Medicaid portion was going to impact, hundreds of thousands of people in North Carolina, and the healthcare subsidy, I think, is a somewhat equivalent amount. So it is a pretty big strike zone of people that it targets. I mean, you kind of debate is a good idea or bad idea. I'm pissed off at health insurance in totality anyway, so I'm probably the wrong person to go on a tirade about that. But that's what the tax aspect is. So Jack, get us out of the doghouse.
I'll be a little more objective. So of course,
wait a minute, that was totally objective.
That was actually not
very
bad.
objective.
All things considered, that was actually not bad.
it was. I'm kidding. So let's talk a little more statistics, because you guys know I like my numbers. So right. So the biggest shock out of all of this is that Republicans are blaming Democrats and Democrats are blaming Republicans, right?
Yeah, that's
Imagine
shocking.
that.
Of course, and as I said, if you really want to know what's going on, flip between channel 114 and 117 on XM, between Fox and CNBC and MSNBC and everything else. And so um, it, I think, first of all, most people that I talked to didn't think it was actually going to happen yesterday. And the reason being is that, we see it all the time for the past 5, 6, 7, 10 years, crying wolf, hey, brinksmanship, we're going to shut it down. It's their fault, not our fault kind of thing. And the reality is it's been actually 2018. So it's been 7 years or so, I think. And it was about a month-long shutdown. And so it has happened, but it hasn't happened in the recent future that people are forgetting, kind of like, okay, what is the actual impact? We predict it, yes. So for example, 750,000 government workers are facing being furloughed. And in the past, it's been, okay, well, they don't work. We're basically telling them to stay home. The ones that are working, they're not going to get paid, but they're required to work. So essential services, as Adam said, IRS automated processing, received a notice from the federal court system from the chief district judge the other day and said, business as usual, this is what we're going to do. And so essential personnel need to report. So it's not slowing down the judicial system at its core. But yeah, the ancillary stuff is being slowed down. In this instance, it's more of a threat because the president is continuing with his, and this is again not a political statement, it's just kind of what it is. President has threatened to reduce the workforce, the federal workforce, through terminations. And so, so the furloughs may turn into permanent terminations. And so that's also a risk. But as Adam said, really the two main issues to kind of categorize them is immigration and healthcare. And there's our interrelationship between those two concepts in this process. So, we'll see what happens, but, obviously it's impacting. You have people that are saying, okay, again, it's convenient when the party that has the votes, and this has happened both ways, has the votes to say, hey, we passed it in the House. The blockage is in the Senate because there's not enough members of the minority party flipping to the majority view and passing whatever resolution or whatever else is in front of them. So that's what's going on in the background. And, obviously even though that there may not be open forum discussions with our political leaders in Washington, I can tell you for certain firsthand knowledge through our Shoemaker advisors that is actually, it's happening. I mean, as you would expect, there's a lot of discussion, a lot of meetings, into the mornings discussing how do we get around this? How do we deal with this? How do we get it to, again, there is a proposal for a stopgap measure, which is a temporary funding, and then to be able to look at it down the road in a short period of time. There are proponents of that, so that way people do not get paid. But then it's the opponents of that is, why do we have to wait till we get to this point to have serious discussions? So again, see it both ways, see it both ways, both sides. So that's the summary of that.
One thing that I will hand it to your point, right, is that like every conversation that I've ever had with somebody that is familiar with kind of the behind the scenes stuff in Washington is that these guys are busting their tail. They're having round the clock meetings. It's not like they're on their porch having iced tea right now being like, yeah, you guys just go ahead and deal with not getting paid, and I'm going to sit here and, kind of watch things. And so I got to hand it to most of the people that I know in Washington, D.C. They're actually getting after it. And, I don't know, maybe there'll be a silver lining in this one, kind of like there has been in previous deals where they've got to pass something where they can maybe actually get some good stuff in that might be part of tax reconciliation or different things, because we've seen that happen before too. Now, I don't know that that's going to happen in this one, because I think that the interest in getting the government back open is such that they want to minimize the moving parts as much as possible, but certainly is a way that it could happen. And that's how the reconciliation, right, which is kind of what's going on right now, right? It's a form of reconciliation is how we got permanence of opportunity zones, right? The one big beautiful bill gave us some great stuff.
Yeah. Good. To dive into it, Ashley, because I got a lot of questions for you.
Awesome.
Okay. So it is Yom Kippur, so they are not meeting evidently today. So thank you, Joe, for weighing in on that. But it looked like you had fiestas going on. So there's so much crap going on. It's like, if they just had to behave like business owners where they had to, make it or break it, it'd be a whole different story. But
I agree with that.
That's why we keep doing this, because if we lose independent, privately held businesses, we are screwed. So anyway.
And Ashley, before you go into that, I have a request of how you frame it in that was thinking about this. So I feel like this is Opportunity Zones 2.0 in a sense that there was 1.0. I think that there were people who missed the opportunity for opportunity zones because they were suspicious about, okay, is this really going to work the way they say it's going to? It's kind of a new thing, so not wanting to be at the forefront. And so I think, and this is a Jack theory or dad theory, if you're talking to my kids, that it's a rebound or a second bite at that apple now that we've seen how it's supposed to go and how it went and how it might go in the future for potential investors on the 2.0 version of this.
I think that the aggregate plan, I think, is the greatest tax incentive ever legislatively created. When you look at the power of what you can accomplish with it, coupled in with the simplicity of how you actually have to do it, right? Where it's really not that complicated. There's nuances to it and you need a professional to help you with it, but it's not like, the lion's share of government assistance, place-based economic incentives that are out there. You don't have to ask for permission from anybody. All you have to do is just do it and make sure that you got a great documentation trail, which is where great professionals like yourself, Jack, and Adam, that's where your teams come in, and us too, right? We help people put together audit trails. But as long as you document it correctly, you can take the position and, you can have massive tax savings as a result. So let's trick through those tax savings just as kind of an overview and as a reminder about the Opportunity Zone program. So under 1.0, you have to have a capital gain. So that's the one unfortunate thing that they did not change, is that you still have to have a capital gain as your equity requirement. So if you take that capital gain and you get it into a qualified opportunity fund within 180 days, you get to defer that capital gain. Under 1.0, you deferred it until December 31st, 2026. Under 2.0, you now get to defer it for 5 years from the date that you put it into a qualified opportunity fund. That tax year, you get a full 5 years of taxes, of tax years that you defer for, and you pay it on the 5th year. And so that's significant because it provides a new deferral window. What's also significant about it is that it doesn't tie it to a deadline like we had under 1.0. Now, that creates good things because you know that you have 5 years, but it also has some, I guess, unintended consequences, because when it was tied to a deadline, it created deadlines in and of itself. Now there's just a rolling 5-year deferral. If you get it in, so this is under 2.0, you get your capital gains in and you defer for 5 years before you sell, you're ultimately going to get a 10% reduction in taxes when you go to pay the taxes in 5 years. So that's nice. What they also did under 2.0 is that they said that if you are investing into rural opportunity zones, then you get 30% reduction in taxes when you go to pay them in 5 years. And you're also going to now, instead of having to double the basis of your buildings for the substantial improvement requirement, now you only have to increase it by 50%. And so that's significant because I think that it's going to spike interest in rural opportunity zones. And yesterday they released the map that is available, and we're going to have that update inside on our webpage. If you go to ozpros.com/map, that will drive you to where you can do a search to find out where the existing opportunity zones are. And we will have an overlay on there to where you can see what the rural opportunity zones under 1.0 are, so that if you wanted to do a rural deal, you could do it. So a couple of things that are significant about that relative to the timing between 1.0 and 2.0 is that the existing zones that were designated under 1.0, they expire on December 31st, 2028. The 2.0 zones, the governors have to designate those zones starting July of 2026. So we should have all of the 2.0 zones designated by January 1st of 2027. Where that's significant is that there's going to be a 2-year window where you could put your money in under 2.0 and be able to go into either 1.0 zones or 2.0 zones. And the rural designation will be there and be applicable to both the existing 1.0 zones and the new 2.0 zones. So some really kind of significant things that are happening there, with the ability to kind of weigh and gauge whether you want to go into 1.0 or 2.0. Now, there's been conversation out there that the way they did this with respect to kind of making this 5-year benefit in 2027, be more attractive, is that it was going to create this dead period between now and 2027. I think that if you're really paying attention to this, that 2026 deadline actually provides a really, really good opportunity that if you've got significant capital gains that you're occurring now, that you don't have any question, you don't have any ability to be able to choose when you want that to happen, or you've got a significant pin-up capital gains, you could actually put that into a fund. And if you can take discounts, right, on valuation for lack of control or under construction or marketability, then on December 31st, 2026, you either pay what your original gain amount was or the value of your QOF investment at the time, whichever is less. And so if you've got $1 million worth of gain and you can put it into a fund that's under construction and you could take a paper loss, you could write that gain down, maybe down to $450,000 from $1 million. And so I actually think that creative tax planning folks that are helping their clients, kind of like you guys do with your clients, is that that's going to present a really significant opportunity for folks to be able to go and to get their cash into funds so that they could take that write down as of December 31st, 2026. And then we step into kind of the permanence where if you don't want to do that, you can now roll it in 27 and you get that 5-year deferral and the automatic reduction when you go to pay the taxes. So Jack, to your point, I think that what this creates is it creates comfort inside of the industry for people to now be like, okay, it was this kind of really tight window. And so it didn't justify me, really educating my sales force, my team, and all of that kind of stuff about the benefits of opportunity zones. And I think that's one of the reasons why we didn't see the broker dealer market, like in the RIA market, really get involved in this. And I think that now that it's permanent, that people realize that this is a for real play that needs to be in everybody's tax planning arsenal, right? You need to have this as a quiver or an arrow in your quiver to be able to use for your clients, because it is so powerful. Because this deferral benefit and then the reduction in taxes, that's a rounding error compared to the main benefit, which is after you hold for 10 years, you get the step up in basis to fair market value. And so that not only eliminates capital gains, but it also eliminates depreciation recapture. So what I think that people are going to do is they're going to understand now that, hey, a 10-year aged fund is actually a really valuable asset to have, because I can continue to cycle either additional investments into it, or I can cycle debt into it. I can go and borrow more money. And now once my fund is aged 10 years, any capital asset that's owned by that fund is eligible for a step up in basis to fair market value. So I could buy something, sell it 367 days later, and be able to eliminate depreciation recapture and have no capital gains. And so it presents a big window for folks that have fleets that are in capital intensive, right? So equipment rental companies, development companies, paving companies, right? Like we've set up a bunch of these for those types of endeavors, because this is going to be really powerful for them, because once their fund turns 10 years old, now they're able to, instead of, having to keep their fleet for 5 years to not get hit with the depreciation recapture, they can start cycling their fleet in 1 year and being able to continue to eat that depreciation. And now with bonus depreciation being back to 100%, I think that that's going to be a really powerful tax play for people to really be applying. So that's kind of the difference between 1.0 and 2.0. 2.0 also added some reporting requirements, which is basically the stuff that's on the 8996 that we were filing anyhow, except that you now have to know how many jobs you're creating inside of the opportunity zones that you're doing. And it creates penalties, pretty significant penalties, if you fail to report that timely. Not all that difficult to do, but it really ups the ante for making sure that you've got good professionals assisting you with making sure that you get that stuff done on time. That's like one of the biggest issues that we have for people, is that they come to us and they're like, oh yeah, I set up this opportunity zone fund back 5 years ago and my accountants haven't filed any taxes on it. Can you help me? And I'm like, ruh-roh. And it's like, all right, how do we fix that? And so this is actually going to make that even more significant. So it's easy to play, right? It's not that complicated, but you better make sure that you got your I's dotted and your T's crossed. And so I think that that's kind of the cool things about, right, like what has happened inside of making this thing permanent, is that there's this renewed interest in it. And now I think it's going to become mainstream, and it should be. So if you look at, and unfortunately, as like what we were talking about earlier, where we were trying to kind of tiptoe around not having any kind of political leaning one way or another, unfortunately, opportunity zones were victim to that same kind of political back and forth. So this program was, it was kind of invented under the Clinton administration by a Clinton administration person. And so he kind of came up with this, and like some policy experts came up with this idea. And so then they tried to get it done under Clinton, couldn't get it done. Tried to get it done under Obama, couldn't get it done. And finally, under Trump, right, like when that perfect storm was happening, they were able to sneak it into the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, literally like within the last week before it passed. And then, Trump is a good, if there's one thing that he is good at, it's taking, credit for stuff, right? And so he did a great job of taking credit for this program that was around way before him. Now, I got it, so once again, he was instrumental in making it get in at the last minute, right? He applied leverage and it got in the door. But it certainly wasn't his program. He just did a good job of taking advantage of it. The unfortunate thing is that the backlash associated with that was like, oh, this is just a play for the rich to get richer, and all of this kind of adverse feedback upon this program that's actually, out there to serve the people that, are dogging it. And so it's fascinating how politics can get into the mix and affect people's public opinion or perception about what a program's doing when the numbers are there, right? So it's literally, I think like $150 billion has gone into opportunity zone funds. And they've got statistical evidence after statistical evidence that shows that opportunity zones, the median house prices are exceeding their peers. The value of real estate definitely has gone up. And that this is actually promoting and it's actually working in the zones as intended. And, I think that they cleaned it up a little bit. So they made the qualification requirements a lot more stringent in 2.0. So the poverty requirements are a little bit more strict, and you can't have contiguous zones. So that should take out some of the ones that you're like, wait, that's an opportunity zone? How did that happen? And so I think that we're going to see the program actually have even that much more positive effect. I know, and I've got literally, like, we've helped over 2,000 people set up opportunity zone funds. And I've just got story after story after story about how, but for this program, they wouldn't have been looking at the deals that they were doing. But because of the program, they're like, okay, I can now do this deal. And I mean, it's crazy the stories I've got about really cool stuff that people are doing, from farms to operating businesses. I got a guy that bought a failed development and turned it into like an autism community that's got a working farm where they're growing chickweed. I mean, it's awesome, the stories that are happening inside of opportunity zones. And
So
I
actually,
think
I'm
that,
gonna,
yeah,
if
go
I
ahead.
could, but I just, Adam's chomping at the bit. I know he wants to ask you a question, so I'm going to preempt him just momentarily.
Yeah,
And
because I'll go on for another 35
well,
minutes.
no, that's fine, and we want you to. But I think that, I know what an opportunity zone is. I think I know where maybe some of them are in Charlotte, but could you kind of maybe give the criteria of what that looks like and maybe some examples for people who are familiar with the Charlotte area
Sure.
geography, what those are currently?
So they were so inside of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, the governors got to designate up to 25% of their low-income census tracts as opportunity zones. And then they could substitute contiguous tracts if they were contiguous to a low-income census tract. So the North Carolina governor used the Department of Commerce to do this, and then they worked with the different counties and the economic development groups in order to be able to proffer zones and to kind of come up with the ones that were going to get designated. So in Charlotte, it's basically the 85 corridor. So that area from kind of NODA over west, like basically like kind of down to the airport. So basically the whole west side. Now, and so people were like, well, man, that's going to get developed anyhow. But man, it freaking put it on a rocket ship because all of that stuff out Freedom Drive and that kind of thing, like all of that's opportunity zone. And I've got a bunch of clients who are doing deals as OZ deals out there in that area. Kind of the closest other ones. So it's basically that 85 corridor. And then Eastland Mall, that area, like, so that census tract is an opportunity zone. The closest one kind of to those then would be, there's a couple up in Statesville, and then there's some in Monroe, and then down out in Wadesboro. So we bought 200 acres out in Wadesboro, and we're planning on building like a boat and RV storage facility out there, inside as an opportunity zone deal where we're going to have solar on top of it. So
Thank you.
Cool.
did that hit your questions like about like which ones they are?
Yes.
Now for 2.0, the designation and the eligibility requirements are significantly tighter relative to the poverty thresholds. But you can go to, so EIG's got a map where you can layer it on. If anybody wants to see the maps, if they reach out to me, I can send you links to maps where you can kind of play with this stuff if anybody's interested. And you can see which ones would be eligible of the 1.0 zones versus 2.0 and all that kind of stuff. But there's generally going to be around a 20% reduction in the amount of eligible zones between 1.0 and 2.0. So it becomes a play, right? So if somebody wants to go do a deal, they can do them in the existing zones all the way to December 31st, 2028. And they don't actually have to have their deal done. They just have to have it started. We're anticipating getting regs that will govern that, but you'll be grandfathered in if you're doing a deal in 1.0.
I put your email address in the chat to everybody, so if anybody is
Thank you.
interested in learning more, grab that on the chat. And we are in an opportunity zone. And man,
Okay,
if you look at what's happened.
Yeah, so that's actually a great example. So Gary's sitting in an opportunity zone right now. How is that significant? Because I don't know that they did their deal as an OZ deal. But because he is there, because they've got this really great space now, and they've got this really powerful accounting team, they are the ideal candidate for becoming an opportunity zone accelerator. And so everybody that leases space, either subleases from you guys or leases in the space where you are, they are eligible to now become an opportunity zone business. So if they can generate a capital gain and we can put that gain into a fund, we can now recapitalize their company with their fund, and we can basically preserve the next 10 years, 30 years of growth to make that become tax-free. And so it presents a huge play for people that have real estate inside of zones that even if they're not going to hit the substantial improvement thresholds, to be able to start leasing that out to businesses that want to take advantage of this stuff.
Yeah,
And now you'll Ashley the fee for that as you're writing down. So Gary, as you're writing that down, make sure send fee to Ashley.
yeah. I just told you what you could do. I didn't tell you how to do it. Yeah. So is it okay if I chime in with a couple questions, Ashley?
Absolutely.
So at some point, you don't have to answer it now, but if you've got some logic as to why they picked only gains versus direct investment, that's the part that I was like, why would
So
you fix that?
frustrating, isn't it?
That's ridiculous. So
I know exactly why they did it. They did it because they needed to cap the amount in order to get it to work inside of the reconciliation.
Yeah.
So Tax Cut and Jobs Act was a similar reconciliation bill, and they had to make it work with the OMB. And so they were like, all right, we know that there's only this amount of capital gains,
Yeah.
and it's likely to be this amount of that. And so it made it a finite universe amount. Whereas if they had opened it up, it could have been unlimited.
Just ridiculous. Anyway, a lot more people would have been helped if it was anything. But independent of that, you mentioned, RIAs and broker dealers are going to get more into it. I mean, the principal rub that, because we would always bring this up as an item when somebody was contemplating a sale of their business, because we always get asked the same question, well, how do I get out of that tax bill? It's like,
and invariably they're asking you afterwards instead of 5 years before when you really actually.
Yeah. So this is like, this is part of the 101 playbook, So the thing that we'd hear though from financial advisors, hopefully there's none on the call, is that, well, you don't know what the performance is going to be. Meaning, like, with the implied theory that while the gain may be tax-free at the 10-year level, if there is no gain, what was the point? Because remember, Ashley, these are going into crappy areas.
The whole reason why they exist is because they're an opportunity zone. And so it's funny because I had that exact conversation with a financial advisor on a guy that had a substantial gain, right? And he's like, "Oh, you don't want to go into an opportunity zone. Those are risky." And so then about a year later, he comes back to me and he's like, "Hey man," he's like, "We got this new opportunity zone fund that's on our platform. I know you might have some clients who might want to be interested." It was completely assets under management and then worried about it going away out of their residual.
Yeah. So my question here is like, is there any sort of publicly available performance, that if you just look at, as a whole, like forgetting about like the direct investment, like I bought the Savona Mills building, because that would be hard to tell. But is there any sort of like public data available that demonstrates, no, in fact, there actually was a return beyond just the tax savings?
Yeah, I mean, so the great thing about having it be a private program is that it's a private program, to Gary's point, right? And it doesn't have the government, freaking all over you. But the problem with that is that it's really hard to really be able to get like, especially performance criteria, to say, okay, yeah, these funds have generated in aggregate, like there's not a Dow Jones industrial average out there for OZs. I know that there have been some that have struggled, but it's namely just because of like the lion's share of OZ deals have been multifamily because that's just what was hot at the time. And multifamily has struggled as an industry as a whole. It doesn't have anything to do with opportunity zones. It just has to do with the fact that financial, all of the different headwinds that have hit that industry are affecting OZ deals as well. And so, I know of a number of ones that are doing extremely well, right? Just anecdotally, of people that have made investments and are doing very well with them. I also know of ones that aren't doing well just because of like there's other deals in that industry that aren't doing well, but it didn't have anything to do with them being an opportunity zone. It was all about, right? Like I've just seen them get mismanaged, right?
Yeah,
or I've seen them, so it's like, there, unfortunately, we don't have that to be able to show that, oh no, OZs are okay. It's all about the investment fundamentals, right?
Yeah.
Okay, who's the sponsor? What kind of deal are they doing? What are their assumptions? And then what kind of debt are they going to put in there as relates to, what kind of risk is that going to cause?
And this is, again, please don't come through the Zoom call and then strangle me, because Ashley's also bigger than I am too. The other concerns that I've heard people express is, hey, these are just black boxes. Have you heard of any fraud or abuse or like Ponzi scheme? Like, yeah, I turned it over to a fund, but then the fund actually didn't do anything with it, or like what it
So I've got,
what it held was Gary's house and Jack's house. Not like
so it's interesting because, right, like I was in the
yeah.
securities world before I did this, right? I help
Mhm.
people do securities offerings. And you know, so we've helped 2,000 people set up funds. We've helped people go into other funds. And I know personally, right, like I've probably between like 5 to 6,000 different deals and offerings and stuff like that that are out there. And of those, I know of three that have been like outright, like where you've had a fraudster involved,
Mhm.
right? Now, and there might be more than that that I just don't know about. But in the context of like when you look at the numbers statistically relative to that, I mean, it's minuscule in comparison to kind of traditional offerings. I think that it's funny because the opportunity zone play gives you this extra benefit, and there's a perception that there's something askew about it. So I think
Yeah.
that causes people to do more underwriting and more due diligence into it. And
Yeah.
so they're actually more careful about making sure that the sponsor knows what the hell they're doing and that it's a good deal. And I've seen three of them. And of those three, one was a complete write off. Literally, the dude just took the money. Another one, they're repurposing, right? Like it was like just the deal fell apart and he brought in too much debt, got over his skis. And so they're bringing in, right, like new money and that kind of thing. And then the third one, they actually had the LPs step in to become the GP. And you know, the SEC is going after the guy because he just skimmed off like 8 million bucks, right?
Yeah.
Now, and unfortunately, it doesn't matter what the industry is, you're going to have freaking bad actor dudes doing that. And so the fact that I've only heard about three is nothing short of amazing.
Yeah, I got you. Last question I've got before Jack grills you.
This is great. I love it.
Chat GPT your questions there, Jack. You know, the other thing that I've heard too is you know, traditionally if I put all my money, you know, with the typical um brokerage house or independent, I can arrange a margin loan against that account based on the fact that it's got, you know, kind of a readily determinable valuable value and liquidity associated with it. Has there been anybody that's done a similar thing for a fund where they've treated it as if it were liquid, even though it's not, and allowed you to borrow against it, versus like being able to borrow against the underlying asset base to cover the tax payment? Like if they're or even if they borrowed against the underlying asset base, if they viewed that as like a recapitalization or return of capital, you know, ahead of time.
Yeah. So
There's a lot of questions in there.
yeah,
Basically,
yeah. So
how do I get my cash early?
so inside of that, inside of an OZ deal, you
Yeah.
can do a cash out refinance after a 2-year investment. So you
Mhm.
put your money in, 2 years later, you could do a refinance and pull all of your money back out. Now, as part of that, a lot of the funds were utilizing that as how they were going to get people their money to be able to pay their taxes. And unfortunately, the capital markets have gone to crap. And so a lot of these fund deals are not able to recapitalize to be able to return capital. And so that presents a problem. We're actually working with where what it does though is that it does allow you to then mark to market your interest and pay way less taxes on what you're going to end up paying in tax. So there is that benefit to an OZ transaction as opposed to what you would get normally. The other thing is that we're working with a funding group right now to try to come up with a solution to do exactly what you're talking about, to be able to come up with a way that people can have some additional tax mitigation stuff to offset against that reduced tax amount that they're going to have to pay in 2026. And that then they will actually fund a margin loan on their interest in whatever investment they've got and in order to be able to pay that tax bill. So when you invest into, you know, kind of third party managed funds, it's just like anything else, right? It's a private investment. And so there's very few people that'll lend on that, right? It's not liquid, right? That's the whole reason why there's usually a lot more return. Now, what we do is we set up captive opportunity funds for people so that that way they can put their money into a fund. They can accomplish all of these same things, but then they've got the ability to choose the deals that they want to go into and to be able to run their own deals. That's the great thing about opportunity zones, is that you can go into professionally managed funds, but then you're kind of at their mercy, or you can do your own deals. And that's kind of the bread and butter and the lion's share of our clients are people that want to do their own deals.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, thanks for answering the questions, Ashley.
So before Jack jumps in here, I want to go back to something that you said, and here's why. One, I want to know if there's anything in it for us at BGW. Two, and equally important, I want to know if there's anything in it for Portman, who is the developer of this place, to get additional folks into this incredible building that other people may not know about. And
Yeah,
so
we could
talk to us
potentially
about
make
the
like their
leasing.
deal. So for Portman, depending on how they structured the ownership of that building, we could potentially make their deal an OZ deal, right? And make it so
I'm
that
sure it probably was a deal. I would
it
think.
might be, I don't know, but we'd need to set up a fund and then backfill their equity with capital gains dollars at this point in time, which we can do. We've done that a lot for people like after the fact. For BGW, granted, I don't think that you're going to want to make the aggregate BGW business be a QOZB, but you certainly could, because you'd be able to qualify where you could actually turn BGW into a QOZB, and now you could preserve the next 10 years of growth and make that come out tax-free. If it's too cumbersome because you may have some I don't know where all of your people are located, then anything that you spin off, so like any new ventures that you do BGW wise, those could certainly be eligible to be opportunity zone businesses. And then the big thing, and this is for you guys as a tenant where you might have extra space, is that you could carve out some co-working space inside of there and then be able to set that up for other businesses that wanted to be QOZBs, where they could come and locate in your space. And then they could, so number one, they can make it so that their 10 years of growth is tax-free. Number two, they're eligible to receive investment from other qualified opportunity funds. And number three, they're eligible to receive investment from somebody that has like pin-up gains in like crypto or the stock market or whatever else it is that they would otherwise not be able to get a hold of. So we got a white paper on the value of locating inside of an opportunity zone that we give to landlords, and that we also give to, people that want to be an opportunity zone business.
So talk about what constitutes an opportunity zone business, and what are the advantages besides 10 years of growth that are, tax.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big one. But the second one is that you could then bring capital in from somebody that has their own fund or that has capital gains and that wants to defer those capital gains. So those are the two main benefits. There's really not, there's nothing you can do on income. They're still going to pay taxes on income, but we've got some solutions for that too, right? Where you can drag the income out into another vehicle and we can own that vehicle via your 10% of your qualified opportunity fund. It's a little bit more complicated. Probably don't want to get into the details of that on this call, but we've got some solutions for people that are high income companies along the way where you can twine the two, and we have an income solution for that as well. So there's, those are the two main benefits. And so for a lot of people, they're like, you know what, I'm going to just go with 1202, right? I'm going to set this up as a 1202 company, and I'm just going to rely on that. For people that aren't eligible for 1202, this is a great alternative. Or for people that are concerned about going across the thresholds for 1202, a lot of times we'll set up OZ with the 1202 in parallel, so that if they hit a moon ball, then they've got opportunity zones that they can fall back on.
All right, cool. You and I will talk more about that and opportunities in depth tomorrow when you see our space.
I can't wait to see it, man. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, Jack, I jumped in front of you. Sorry.
No, all good. I've asked the questions that I want to ask, so continue onward to.
So one thing that I did, so somebody brought up ChatGPT, and I've got like the most hardcore one that you can find, right? And I regularly will ask it like fairly nuanced questions that are OZ wise. And it's fascinating to see how much better it's gotten over the last year, right?
Mm.
Because I mean, like it was spitting out stuff before that I was like, good Lord, that is like completely wrong, right? Now it's like nuanced because it's gotten better at kind of going out there to different people that are putting articles out and stuff like that. The problem is that inside of opportunity zones, there's no case law, zero. And so it's all based
Mm.
upon kind of what the different professionals in the industry determine is kind of consensus and is inside of the gray area. And so you've got people that are more conservative that are pumping out like articles. And then you got people that are more aggressive that are pumping out articles. And so chat will pull from both of those sometimes and give you completely conflicting results based upon those articles that they're able to find with respect to that specific issue. That's the reason why you need a really good professional that can navigate through that and that understands the nuances that are happening inside of the industry. So, all right, you got your hand up, man. So what
Yeah,
is
I
it?
just thought of my next question as you were
All right.
saying. So what are the top 3 misconceptions, accurate misconceptions of OZs that you've encountered recently that people
Um,
believe is true but is not?
so the first one used to be that the program was basically done, right? And now with OB3, people are oh, it's now kind of made permanent, but that still hasn't gotten out there to everybody. So that's, I think, the number one is that, oh, this thing's going to expire and it's not worth my time. The second one is that I've got to have a massive capital gain in order to take advantage of this. It's not true. We can take a fairly small capital gain and we can use that. Certainly, if you're just starting a business, right? Like we can start with a really minimal one. And then I think the third one is that they can do it like with ChatGPT and they can wing and a prayer it, right? And they can, have all of their crap, right? Like in a folder in the back of their trunk and that they're going to be okay. And the key thing is that you need to have your audit trail buttoned up on an annual basis. And you need to make sure that you got all of the backup together that backs up the position that you're taking. Because and we regularly do. So we have a mock audit that we do for somebody that's used somebody else to set their stuff up. They've been operating for a while and they're like, hey, I think that somebody might have jacked this up. So all right, we'll review it. And we get into it and we're like, hey, yeah, you were right. Not only did they jack it up here, but they jacked it up here, here, and here. And so this is the way you can fix it, or we can do the, so there's a lot, I think there's a lot of misconception, unfortunately, that this is so easy that I can basically, create a hand turkey and I'm going to be all good. And so you definitely need to run through the steps and know about those in order to be able to get this on the back end. Because let's be honest, you get 10 years of growth and you got 7 figures of taxes that you're saving, it's going to be an attractive target for the IRS to come and look at that. And so, and I think that by definition that it can't be an audit flag because it was legislatively created, but I think that certainly it could, it could gain the ire of different, auditors and enforcement personnel inside of the service. And so you got to be prepared to be able to defend your position.
All right, so last question because we're almost done. Is this sounds wonderful. I'm too busy, or maybe I'm too lazy, and I want to get involved. I want to diversify my portfolio of just investments. So can I get in on someone else's opportunities? And either, can I jump into one, and how would I do that? I know the answer is yes, but how would one go about looking at that?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's tons of funds out there that do all kind of advertising, right? So you've got tons of managed funds. And if somebody's interested, right, if they're like, listen, I need somebody to serve this up on a silver spoon, we can help them with that. Where we're like, all right, which kind of industry are you interested in? These are, really kind of advanced sponsors, right? And accordingly, you're going to get kind of, industry related returns there, right? That of a professionally managed deal. Or these are some guys that are smaller, right? There's probably inherently more risk inside of that because they're not an institution that's running this deal, but their returns are a lot greater as well. And they're doing kind of more aggressive, creative stuff. And so it just kind of varies on where they are in the risk, on that spectrum. And we can certainly help them with that. And then if they want to do their own deals, we can set them up their own fund.
Okay, I'm out of questions. I'm out of time. I had 5
Good
questions.
stuff.
I'm out of time.
Good stuff. I mean, yes.
Those are great
Joe
questions, by the way.
said
Thanks.
you were speaking Adam's language, and you were.
Well, and I mean, I think it's a great play for you guys, right? I mean, it gives you lots of options. So being located in that spot, gives you guys lots of options. It'll be fun kind of going through some creative possibilities tomorrow when we get together.
No, this is awesome, Ashley. It's funny when we're like, hey, let's talk opportunity zones. We're like, isn't that only like 5 minutes?
It's amazing how it's like, once
great
you kind
job.
of peel it back, you're like, ooh, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Ooh, let's talk about that. Yeah.
Yep. No, great job, man.
Yeah. Well, appreciate you guys having me on. And
Yeah,
as
thank you.
always, great seeing you.
We'll put this thing up on the BGW YouTube channel, and Shoemaker has their own YouTube channel. This will be up for, delayed.
Yeah, send it over to me, Gary, so we can
replay.
post it on ours too.
Yeah.
We'll do it.
Awesome.
Okay.
All
Thanks,
right.
guys.
Appreciate it,
Thank you,
guys. Have a
Thank
good
you,
one.
Ashley.
All right. Bye.